I had my children on the floor. I was on my favourite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realised in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women.
Like I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world, sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, my name is Anna, and I am the Natural Birth Podcast host. I'm a former midwife who left the system, and I'm now the proud founder of Sacred Birth International, a woman-owned company with a mission to revolutionize the birth world and bring focus to the sacred and the natural intelligence of the birth process. We do this by providing world-class education, courses, programs, and coaching to equip women with the knowledge and the tools to have conscious pregnancies, empowering and positive birth experiences, and the most nourishing start possible for themselves and their babies postpartum. We also educate and mentor aspiring birth workers into sacred space holders and physiological birth advocates in the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship, the Beyond a Doula training. If you'd like to work with me or take any of our courses, programs, or the mentorship, then head on over to sacredbirthinternational.com to find out more. Hi, breath, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. It is such a delight to have you here.
I'm really happy to be here. I've listened to so many episodes, and I think every time I would listen, I would imagine myself telling my story. So it's really lovely to be here, and birth stories have so much medicine within them for the people listening and the woman telling her story. I think there's you can learn something more about yourself every time you tell your birth stories, I think. So I'm looking forward to see what comes out today.
Yes, and I'm really excited to hear your stories too. I was fortunate enough to be on at your mother blessing for your second. You have three babies. Um, and we know each other from when I was a midwife in the hospital in Australia, and we did some circles together. We did some postpartum work together, some spiritual postpartum work, some holding that portal for women. Um, and so it's so lovely now to have you here on the podcast, to introduce you to the world, to my little community here, and to dive on into. I haven't heard, I feel, at least not in depth, your third free birth story, and you've gone through a birth center birth, a home birth with a midwife, and your free birth with your last. And it's going to be beautiful to just weave these stories together, even though I kind of know, it's so lovely to just hear it all at once, and the journey, you've been on as a woman, and then, becoming a birth worker, you're a doula, and now obviously you're a sacred birth worker. You're one of my little clan, special people, which I'm also so grateful for. And yeah, so excited to see what you're gonna be birthing this year as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. Um, yeah, it's just feels like kind of this like full circle thing, when you follow your intuition and you follow the little nudges that you get. I think us meeting years ago and doing a little bit of work together and being in temple together, yeah, it really was like that first little step towards what we're doing together now. And me doing the mentorship and the business course, it's yeah, it's kind of like a full circle journey. So it's very cool.
I'm so delighted to have you there. So beautiful. Today we will start at your first birth story, and weave our way through to your home birth and free birth. So take us back to, becoming pregnant. I remember you were quite young for your first, correct?
Yeah. So I fell pregnant when I was 20 and I was a student midwife. And I remember on my first day at uni, they said there's going to be a certain percentage of you who just get so inspired and enthusiastic about it that you'll end up pregnant and you might drop out or you might end up in the next year's cohort. And that ended up being me. Yeah, so I fell pregnant when I was 20 and I about midway through my pregnancy stepped away from uni for a while and I just missed the birth world so much that I decided to do my doula course with the Australian Doula College. And so, as many women that do your mentorship, Anna, would know, like, it's just such a lovely experience to go through something like that when you're pregnant. So, I essentially had 4 or 5 doula sisters that were going through it with me, and um, having that adjacent to my uh, more formal studies as a midwife was really eye-opening. And I was so young as well. Like I hadn't even heard of a chakra or, essential oils or all those kind of doulary things. Um, but yeah, just it was the advocacy that really kind of hooked me. And I ended up finishing my nursing degree and I just couldn't see myself being in the system. So doing that doula training at that time was just, yeah, really like the beginning of my soul path. But yeah, so I was pregnant at 20 and I decided that I really wanted to have a home birth. And where I lived, I was just about an hour away from a big tertiary hospital that I think at the time they were the only hospital that was doing publicly funded home births. And so I thought, great, like that's me. I think I like got in contact with them, at like 7 or 8 weeks or something and said, put me down. Um, but I was actually just outside of their area. Um, but I convinced them to let me in anyway. And I had a really kind of uneventful pregnancy. I was just really excited, young first time mom. And I was just really looking forward to my birth because I think from my childhood, what I learned about birth, my mum I'm the oldest of 4 girls. So I got to see my mum, having her babies in the hospital, but she had twins and she was like a local celebrity. I think she was one of the last women to birth twins at Proserpine Hospital. Um,
Vaginally.
yeah. That was
Whoa.
back in the 90s.
That would not happen today.
Yeah, I think that ended when the doctor, that particular doctor, retired. Um, but yeah, I just remember my mum kind of saying to me that like birth will show you what you're made of.
Mm.
And my mum's like a really kind of she's got grit and yeah, she she was just a real inspiration for me because I thought if she can birth 2 babies, then I can birth one. And I'd been at quite a few births by that point in the hospital. I'd been to some C-sections and I'd also um, got to attend a few births that were with a private midwife in the hospital. Um, so that was really good. I think I just had like this really broad view of what birth could look like. And I also had recognized that it was the mothers that were actually, or the women that were not neglected, but like kind of forgotten about. And they might send me in to do the obs every now and again. And I'd just be like, yeah, she's fine. And they were the women that were having, the natural births and no interventions. And I also got to witness like how they got through that, like moving around and making their noises and having a supportive partner. So yeah, going into birth, I was just really excited and I had like a good level of confidence, I think, which really helped me. But towards the end of my pregnancy, I decided not to have my baby at home, that I would go into the birth center. And I think I was saying that at the time. My husband was in the Navy. We lived in defense housing. We would be moving soon. And so it didn't really feel like my home. So that's what I kind of put my decision down to. But at the same time, I think there was a bit of pressure from the midwives. They would comment on how far they were going to have to travel to get to me and how far away we were. And so I think there was a bit of people pleasing there. And I just, yeah, they gave me a tour of the birth center. And I was like, I'm having my baby at home. If I'm coming in, I'm not coming to the birth center. So, but it was beautiful. And I said, yes, okay, we'll have the baby there. So going into labor, there's a funny moment in that story, a really strange little intuitive moment. I think I was about 3 days overdue. Um, 3 days past that date. And we were just watching TV, and we were laying on a mattress, and I rolled over to my husband and I said, I just had a contraction. And I thought to myself, what are you talking about, woman? I had not had a contraction. I didn't even have Braxton Hicks with that pregnancy. And within a few seconds, boom, that first contraction hit me. And so that was just wow, the words kind of came out of my mouth before I had a chance to catch them or think them. And yeah, so that was just a really cool moment. And yeah, I'd had some little intuitive moments that day as well. I only had a tiny little car, so I had gone around the corner to borrow my uncle's big 4-wheel drive so that I'd be a bit more comfortable on my trip to the birth center. And when I got in the car and for that 30-second drive, Van Halen Jump came on the radio, and I didn't know whether my baby was a boy or a girl, but we'd decided that we were going to call her Halen. So for that song to just randomly come on, I thought, ooh, is that a little sign? And so that was the day that I went into labor. So yeah, so after that first contraction, I kind of just kept it to myself. I was just feeling the waves coming and going, and I kind of wanted everyone to go to bed so that I could just be on my own. But I told my husband, and he said, well, remember what the midwife said, we need to rest as much as we can. So he went to bed.
Oh my.
And I'm sure you've heard it so many times before, but I was too excited to sleep.
Yeah.
So I stayed up with my mum, and she was just giving me some back rubs, and I braided my hair and packed my bag. And at some point I hopped in the shower, and I was really just happy in there until all of a sudden I just wasn't. And I hopped out of the shower, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, something's changed. This is really kicked in, and I think we should go now, because the intensity just kind of went up a notch. So we all piled in the car and did it was an hour drive, but it actually took us only about 45 minutes because it was 4 o'clock in the morning, thank God, and there was no other traffic. And I think my contractions were coming about every 3 minutes because I'd open my eyes and see the digital clock in the car. But we made it to the birth center, and my midwife met us there. And I'd said that I didn't want any vaginal examinations unless I asked for them. But when we got there, I just wanted to know where I was at. And so she checked me, and I think I was 4 or 5 centimeters, and I was happy with that. So I hopped in the shower, and I don't know how long I was in there for, but I just really wanted to get in the bath. So I got in the bath, and it wasn't like a birth pool, it was like a built-in hard like triangle shaped bath. So like I found it a little difficult to get comfortable in there, but eventually I just found a rhythm, and like the whole like the rest of the world kind of dissipated in a way. And I just really focused on my breathing and like letting some moaning come out of me, which I just think really helped. And it just kind of put me in this meditative state. Um, but I remember seeing the sun beginning to come in the window and thinking, oh wow, like it's the next day. And just having that little moment of looking outside myself, then that kind of allowed like outside like thoughts to come in, thinking like, how much longer is this going to take? Where am I at now? Like, can I do this? This is really intense. Maybe I should just have a C-section, you know? Um, and looking back, I think that was a bit of transition, and I had a bit of an adrenaline rush, and all of a sudden I just needed to know where I was at. So I hopped out of the bath and got my midwife, because she was just like outside leaving us to it. And I asked her to check me, and she said I was 9.5 centimeters with a cervical lip. And I'd heard cervical lips before, and I just went, I am. I don't have a cervical lip. In my mind, I was like, no, you don't exist.
Bloody lips, right? Fucking lips. Oh my goodness. If anyone's listened to me for any length of time, you know how I've been ranting about this bloody cervical lip. That's just your body will move the cervix out of the way. Like, stop
Yes,
talking about this lip,
I know. It's a bit of a mythical creature, really. But yeah, so I thought, okay, I've got like, 0.5 centimeter of cervix or something, like, I'm well on my way now. And so I went to go back and get back in the bath, but I couldn't quite make it before the next contraction came. So I sat on the toilet. And when I sat on the toilet, I thought, oh, I feel a little bit like pushy here. And I also like felt down there, and I could feel the bag of waters. And I'd also seen women pushing like for a really long time on their with the bag of waters there. And I don't remember it being like a real, like really conscious thought, but before the next contraction came, I like quickly hopped back into the bath, and as I did with the next contraction, I just pinched my bag of waters, and it released in the pool. And I just really, felt her just drop down then. And I told the midwife like my water broke, and so she's kind of there like, okay, like things are going to happen now. And she held the mirror for me so I could see, and I could see when I was pushing her head coming down and then kind of going back in a little bit, and coming down and going back in. But I could kind of uh, hold myself in a way that like she wouldn't go all the way back in. Like I was, I could see that I was making progress. And then her head was on my perineum, and that ring of fire really woke me up. And I just remember thinking like, I've just got to get this baby out of me now. Like I've just got to push. And with the next contraction, I pushed her head out, and up until then I'd been having like back to back, and well, not back to back, like piggybacking contractions. So like I'd have a peak, and it'd drop off a little bit, and then another peak, and it'd drop off, and they were really quite close together. And once her head was out, there was just this break, and it was just so lovely, because it was just a really nice pause, because I think things had kind of been happening kind of fast for me being a first time mum, and And then just to have that bit of a break, like her head's out, I was, feeling her head, I could feel her hair. And I said to my husband, like, touch her hair. And I could feel her kind of wriggling and moving around. And then with the next contraction, she was born, and I, like, nobody else touched her. I just lifted her up onto my chest and just became completely absorbed in her. And I think I just gave her a little bit of a rub. Like, she wasn't really slow to start or anything, but I remember thinking, like, I just wanted to hear her cry so I could just be like, okay, I've done it. She's okay. We're all good. And she cried. And yeah, then I was just in my little bubble with my baby. And I just remember just feeling like so proud of myself that I'd done it. I had had no interventions. I had no pain relief or anything like that. And to be honest, I didn't even really think about it. I just went so into this state that, like, I wasn't thinking about anyone else helping me or, like, looking for anyone to tell me what to do. I was just, yeah, it really was like riding waves or being smashed by the waves at some time. But anyway, so she was born, and I'm just in my little bubble with her. And I heard the midwife said, like, oh, I don't really like the color of this water. Like, we need to try and get your placenta out. And I had wanted to have a natural third stage, so I didn't want to have the injection of oxytocin. And that's what we discussed in my birth plan and in our meetings and everything. But so she wanted to get me out of the pool. So we got out of the pool and onto the bed, and I don't know if I was kind of out of it from losing blood or if I was in the birth bubble, but I kind of didn't really know what was going on around me. Like, people started coming into the room, and the midwife came over to me with the gas bottle and the mouthpiece, and I saw her because I knew she cranked, like, I saw her turn it all the way up, and she gave me the mouthpiece and said, like, here, like, breathe, have a big breath on this. And I remember kind of looking at her thinking, like, I've already had the baby, but I trusted her. Like, I just trusted, like, the look that she gave me. And there were doctors in the room, and so I breathed on that gas, and the doctor began to try to manually remove my placenta, and I, like, left my body, like, just passed out, and I flew around the entire world like a couple of times, like Peter Pan style. Like, I was just like, oh wow, like, here I am now, like, flying around the world. And then then I saw my sister, like this tiny little person in Australia with this huge long arm that shot up, and I grabbed her hand and she pulled me back in, and I woke up, and they'd pulled my placenta out, and I think they'd given me lots of drugs, and I was like, okay now. But that was just so unexpected, and it really started me off on, like, the back foot in my, mothering journey with breastfeeding and all of that. Yeah, so that was a wild ride after her birth. And when I speak about her birth, I always say, like, I had a beautiful natural birth, and then this happened afterwards. Yeah.
And, that was a while ago now, and I'm guessing you've processed that many times and been sitting with that. And what's your intuition telling you? What do you think was the reason for that? What happened? What?
Before I had my next baby, I really sat with that because I wanted to have a home birth, but I didn't want to die. Like, they told me that I would have died, and yeah, so I really had to sit with that. And I think it was a combination of things. All I could really do was look at myself and maybe my part in what happened. And I actually put it down to this movie or TV, 3-part TV series that I'd watched as a child. That was my favorite. One of my mum's best girlfriends, she'd taped it off the TV. And so whenever we go and visit her, she'd put that on. And at the very beginning, it was a Merlin story. And when Merlin's mother was giving birth to him, sorry, um, not long afterwards, they kind of turn around and she's just like, dead. And I remember asking my mom, like, what happened? And being told that, in the olden days, a lot of women would bleed to death after they had their babies. So I think that was very deeply there in my subconscious. So that would, yeah, that's what I put my part in that situation down to. Yeah, and then in my next birth, the pool was clear. I barely bled. So yeah.
Yeah, it is really fascinating and interesting. And that's why I, ask, because it's not so straightforward as just, oh, your body just couldn't birth your placenta. That we're so multi-layered. And as everyone who's listening to this podcast know, like your subconscious mind is so powerful, both to birth your baby, but also, your beliefs around everything, also the birth of the placenta, um, whatever your lineage is carrying that you've came to, inherit through epigenetics, transgenerational trauma. We carry in our womb so much from the feminine, just collective as well. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so it is curious to think about all these things. It's not so
Yeah.
straightforward as just a physical process not working or working.
Yeah. Another interesting thing on that too was that, I'm a larger woman. I'm almost 6 foot tall. And I think I can bleed a lot more and still be okay than a smaller woman. Like that makes sense, right? And even after all of that had happened and I was back in the ward, I'd ended up in the hospital, obviously. And I was on the ward, like they'd told me that I'd lost almost 1.5 liters of blood. And then there was a woman in the bed next to me who said that they'd told her she'd lost around 600 milliliters of blood. And she was having a blood transfusion and I didn't need one. So, I think there was a bit of fear and maybe a bit of panic with the midwife. Like, I don't remember her even really guiding me to try and get the placenta out. It was like she kind of tried without me really knowing. And then when it wasn't happening and I was bleeding, then, it just turned into an emergency. And I actually ended up having to go back 7 weeks later, 7 weeks postpartum for a D&C because there was still some placenta left in there and I was becoming unwell. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So you did a lot of work around this, obviously, for your second birth. And what else happened during that time between your first and your second?
A lot happened between my first and second babies. My husband and I tried to have our second baby, and I ended up having 3 miscarriages over the course of about 2 years. And they were, 2 of them were spontaneous, and one of them was missed. And the baby hadn't been growing for around 7 or 8 weeks. So I went straight in for a D&C for that one. But having 3 miscarriages in a row, like after the second one, you're like, oh wow, I'm really unlucky. And then after the third, you start thinking like, okay, like maybe something's not right. But because I was so young, like I was still in my early 20s, the doctor was kind of saying to me, like, you're young, you can obviously fall pregnant, um, you know, just keep trying kind of thing. Like, we're not going to do too many investigations or anything. So that was kind of quite disheartening, but that marriage ended up breaking down and I think I actually credit a lot of my strength in leaving that relationship to having been through those miscarriages, because it really just showed me that, you know, I can go through things and take care of myself in a way. Yeah. Because I didn't really have the support that I needed in that relationship. A few more years down the track, though, I was in another long-term relationship, and we'd decided that we wanted to have children, and I was still having miscarriages, and that's when it really kind of became quite difficult, because it was like obvious by that point, like something's not right. And I know a lot of women just, you know, don't get those answers, and that's really difficult. But yeah, it was during that time that I found myself meeting women that, like, at birth conferences where they're going to be, but you know, that knew womb massage and yoni steaming and Chinese medicine and all of these kind of alternative things. And I made some beautiful connections and met some teachers that taught me mainly how to care for myself while I was going through those miscarriages. And it really just made all the difference to me. And it set me up to care for myself just in my, you know, in my general life, and care for myself as a woman and a cyclic being. So that was like where I began to kind of differentiate from, and I was working as a birth worker as well, which was quite hard at the same time. I actually had a miscarriage at a birth, and yeah, I just kind of got to the point where I could really clearly see that I couldn't show up for the women the way that I wanted to, just because of what I was going through in my personal life. And my daughter ended up having an accident, and so I stepped away for a while. And in that time, yeah, I just, so many roots kind of went down and connected me to who I truly was as a birth worker and who I truly was as a birthing woman. And after my 6th miscarriage, I was told the reason why I'd likely had so many miscarriages. It was just a blood test, genetic blood test, and they told me that I had something called Robertsonian translocation, which essentially is where 2 of your chromosomes are fused together. And so all the genetic material is there, but when they count your chromosomes, it looks like there's one missing. So I'm genetically healthy, but a lot of my eggs, the majority of my eggs, will either have too much information or not enough. And so that causes early miscarriage. And the particular chromosomes that mine were to do with, there was actually the potential to have a baby that could survive to term or close to term, but essentially wouldn't live long. So that was quite confronting information. And I'd just received the diagnosis, and they'd told me, don't Google it, wait for the genetic counselors to call you, because every case is unique and we don't want you to be, like, you know, freaking out if it's not necessary. So I didn't. I left that, and it wasn't long after that relationship that I was in ended. And so at that time, it was a really big time for me personally, and I moved out into that tree house. I think you came there one time or a couple of times, Anna, with my daughter, and I really just let go of the idea of having more babies. And really just felt into my relationship with my daughter and being fulfilled with her, which I was. Yeah, there was just a real, like, lots of letting go at that time. And so when I met my partner that I'm with now, which actually wasn't that long, like maybe 6 months later, but we'd known each other for a couple of years by that point. He was one of my good friends. And so I invited him over to have a cup of tea and see the treehouse. And yeah, we fell in love, and it was just like a beautiful whirlwind of meeting each other. And I fell pregnant with our daughter. Like, I think I had one cycle, so I fell pregnant like straight.
Yeah, I remember your love story. I remember because I think it was for my birthday, we all went out on this boat, it's Sundays in the Great Barrier Reef, and you were like, you just met this man, and you were just like so in love,
I
and yeah, not.
couldn't hardly talk. I couldn't really speak. I was just like so high. We're swimming, listening to the whales under the water, and that was just, yeah, beautiful, beautiful time. Um,
And then shortly after you got pregnant, it was just all such
yeah.
when and this is something I want to say too. It's very so it's the egg that chooses the sperm, right? We've been told for so long that all the sperm are they're fighting and they're the fittest and the strongest is going to win, the masculine way of seeing itself. But no, it's actually the egg that chooses and
Mhm.
selects, and it's not the first sperm that makes it. The egg selects. And that also goes with, it's very curious, and I've met this with so many women that have tried for a long time with one partner and then leaves them and just falls pregnant super quick with
Mhm.
someone else. And it's also very curious with women who are on the pill, who obviously then have disconnected to like, they don't have that same relationship with the pheromones and like actually being attracted to the right man who genetically will serve her for having babies, but might choose a man that's not. And then she gets off the pill and she's no longer attracted to her partner when they're going to try to get pregnant. That's really curious to me. Oh,
Yeah.
so it's curious that
It's
you say this, right? That obviously this was the man you were supposed to have these babies with.
Yeah, and even that day when he came over just for a cup of tea, like, I said to him, like, have you ever thought of having kids? And I was like, why am I asking him this? And yeah, and his answer was beautiful. Um, yeah, so I actually knew when I fell, like, the when we conceived Trista, um, I've written about it in my journal the following morning, just in my morning pages. And because we lived in that, yeah, beautiful tree house, big windows right behind me. I remember like looking out, seeing a shooting star and becoming really emotional. And I wrote all of this in my journal, and I finished it with our baby. And so then a few weeks later, when I found out that I was pregnant, I was like, I knew it. And yeah, it was just such a really personal and beautiful experience that was. But when we because I'd had so many miscarriages, I was like a just nervous, as is expected. And being with a new partner, he hadn't been through this before, even though I had. So I really just wanted to get that first scan so that I knew that, because usually at that first or second scan, that's when I would find out like baby's not growing anymore, or a blighted ovum and different things. So I really just wanted to get to that ultrasound. And when we did, they could see the sac, but they couldn't see a baby. And I just remember being like, oh no, not again. Um, but also like, that's okay, like, I'll get through this. but they'd said to me, like, it might be too early. I was pretty sure of my dates because I was tracking my cycle. I just keep it in my journal. And they said, you know, if you're certain of your dates, then, and we can't see the baby at this point, then like most likely with your history, like it's probably going to be another miscarriage, but come back in another week or 2 weeks just to make sure. And when we came back, there she was. She was in there. And I took the dates that they'd kind of calculated, like my due date and everything from that scan, and backtracked, and it aligned perfectly with that journal entry. Because, yeah, I'd actually, after I'd made the journal entry and written our baby, I went back to see when my period was and went, oh, no, that wouldn't be when I'm ovulating. I would have ovulated last week already, but somehow I ovulated like almost a week later than normal. And it just felt like it was all like part of this kind of divine timing. Yeah. And so that was just such a relief, such a relief. But at this same time, because it had taken so long, it had been almost 12 months since I'd received that diagnosis, that they'd told me not to Google, to just wait for the genetic counselor to call. And it had been nearly 12 months. And I followed it up because I was like, I'm pregnant now, so I really need to know, like, you know, what you have to tell me. So we had that call, and they filled me in, and at that point I wasn't aware. I thought that I would just be having more miscarriages. I didn't realize that I could potentially have a really unwell baby. So that was quite confronting, and they advised me that I should have a CVS test because that would be a definitive, which is, I always explain it like a placenta biopsy, right? And the placenta has the same genetic makeup as the baby. So if they take some of the placenta, they can see that the baby's got the right amount of chromosomes and all of that. So I consented to that. And I did that at about 12 weeks. And that was actually quite brutal. Like I felt a little bit traumatized after that. They kind of explain it like, you know, it's just a needle and like just do your breathing. And but when I saw that needle, like and yeah, my placenta was on at the back of my uterus. So like they were really like digging in and like holding things out of the way to get to it. And I did have some cramping and just felt uncomfortable after that. But a couple of days later, it was Christmas Eve, the doctor called and said, great news, everything looks fine. So that was just such a relief, a real relief. And he asked me if I wanted to know the sex of the baby. And I think after having like 8 or 9 years of just bad news, bad news, bad news, I thought, yep, tell me, like I can take all the good news I can get right now. And rather than just telling me, he said, well, what do you think it is? And up until that point, I think I'd been kind of almost detached in a way. I was just really kind of waiting for this good news so that I could really settle in and into the pregnancy. So I hadn't really thought much about whether or not the baby was a boy or a girl, but I said girl, and he said, yep, you're right. And yeah, so that was just really lovely. We were so happy, and everything it felt like it was, you know, we were about to have like this happy ever after. Until about 6 weeks later, we just started telling everyone that we were pregnant, and I went for the like 18-week scan, and I'd had enough scans by then to kind of be able to follow along. And the oh gosh, what are they called? The ultrasound tech lady. She started making phone calls, and I was thinking like, what's going on here? And she said that my cervix was shortened and that I needed to go like straight to the hospital, that I was at risk of my baby coming early. And that was just such a massive shock. Like it was just not something that I thought would happen to me. I guess nobody really does, right? Um, and yeah, so we went to the hospital and they put me on progesterone and said to go to Townsville, which was 3 hours away, to the specialist, actually the same doctor that had done the CVS test, to go there the next day and that they might put a stitch in my cervix. So that next 24 hours was quite scary. Like where we were living, we had composting toilets. I was afraid to sit on the toilet. Like I was just kind of afraid to do anything. But we went to Townsville and they looked at everything again and said, yeah, we'd like to put a stitch in your cervix. And they like asked me if I would consent to that. And like I thought about it for, I think they gave me overnight. Like they said, we'll do it tomorrow, think about it overnight. And that was a really hard decision for me to make. You know, by this point, you know, I had a deeper understanding of the cervix, and that it's not just like, you know, it's not just an organ or a part of your body. There's a lot more to it on a personal level and all of that. So it felt like a really big choice to make. And in making that choice, it felt like I was telling my body that I didn't trust it. But at the same time, like I kind of had this little moment, I remember, before I was going in for the surgery, where I kind of just said to my body, like, I do trust you, but, you know, we've kind of been interfered with here, and I've been through so much. I've lost so many pregnancies. Everyone's expecting me to get this stitch, and I think I just need to do it so that I can relax, like to a degree, and not just be so worried for the rest of the pregnancy. So I decided to have the stitch placed, and then from then on I was on bed rest, and I had to stay in Townsville, which was 3 hours away from home. Luckily, my daughter, who was 9 at the time, could stay with my parents, and we would see her on the weekends. But nothing much really happened after that. I got to lay in bed and be fed and looked after by my partner. And throughout this whole time, like from I think I was maybe like, yeah, 6 or 7 weeks, I had wanted to have a home birth. That was my plan. I was going to have a home birth. I worked through those fears, and but there was still, like, you know, a big obstacle. There was no home birth midwives in the area, right? But over the years, I'd written down a few names and contact details of midwives that would travel, and kind of just had them in my back pocket. So I contacted one of them, and she was happy to travel. I think it was like 16 hours she drove. Yeah. In the end, I'm giving away spoiler alert. But yeah, so she agreed to take me on. And when I had all of this going on with my cervix, I just kind of, I kept her updated, and she really stood with me. She was like, once that stitch is gone, like there's no reason why you can't have a home birth. So I really held on to that and just had to trust that everything was going to be okay. And I think deep down I really knew that it would be. I mean, I had my moments, but in general, I felt good, and I did trust my body. Um, so yeah, so I was on bed rest. I had the home birth midwife in the background. I got to, I think, 32, 33 weeks, and they said, you can go home now, because if your baby comes now, you're close enough to other hospitals that would be able to take you or transfer you. I didn't have to stay in Townsville. So I got to come home, and that's when we had my beautiful blessing way, which was like transformational. It makes me, like, I'm getting emotional thinking about it. It was just, oh, so beautiful and so empowering. And the words that those women gifted me, like I still hold them with me now. Yeah, so it was at that point that it really felt like I think I'm gonna make it. Um, I got to 37 weeks. I just had all of these milestones, you know. First it was like get to 24 weeks so that if the baby comes, like it has a chance of surviving. And like there was just all these little milestones that I had in mind, and I just kept making it to them and being like, okay, what's next? And what was next was getting to 37 weeks to go get the stitch removed. So we did that, and I was all ready with all my bags in case anything happened. And I'd even like planned another photographer in that city just in case. But nothing happened. They took the stitch out, which was not fun because you're under general anesthetic when it goes in, but when they take it out, it's just a speculum and they cut it and pull it out. So that was yeah. That was almost another out of body experience. And I said, oh, can I keep it? And they were all laughing at me. I went, can I take it home? And it wasn't like, to me, it wasn't a stitch. It was like a cord, like a rope. It was so thick. But I kept that, and I ended up doing some ceremony with that in my next pregnancy. Because I didn't want to have the stitch, and I just wasn't going down that path just to close that. Yeah, so I had the stitch out, and then it was like, okay, it's on, we're back at home, midwife's on her way, she'll be here in a few days. And yeah, I just got busy setting up my birth space, which was just so beautiful because that house was just so amazing out there in the rainforest with the outdoor bathroom and shower and everything. Yeah, so I'd made it. The midwife arrived and she was lovely. She stayed in a little earth ship, which is like a granny flat on the property. And she kind of just kept to herself, going and doing like touristy things. And she'd kind of pop in every now and again, but she was just happy, like keeping to herself. She was knitting me a blanket. And I think I'd started having some kind of pre-labor in the night that would just fizzle out in the morning when the sun came up. I think about 3 or 4 nights in a row. And she was just super encouraging. And she was like, you know, your body's doing it. You might, you know, you might be already making some progress. And she just kind of had this really optimistic frame around it that just like, I don't know, just helped me to stay really positive. I have a pretty optimistic disposition to begin with, but you know, it's hard those days when you know, you wanted your baby to be here, like, you know, on their date. But yeah, so I was having that kind of pre-labor, and then one of those mornings, like the sun had come up, and I thought, oh, it's not really backing off like it has been. Maybe this is it. And so I called my mom and got her to come and pick up my daughter to just take her out and take her shopping, or I think they were going shopping. And I texted the midwife and she said, I'll just come up and see how you're going. And she, once she'd been with me for 5-10 minutes, she said, I think things are happening this time. And she was very hands off. Like I didn't really have any monitoring. I don't remember her like taking my blood pressure or anything like that. But she just said, I'm going to go back down to the earth ship, and you just call me when or if you need me. And so she left and my partner went downstairs, and I think he was just like making coffee and breakfast and things. And I was just like laying upstairs. It was a like beautiful A-frame, big bedroom with timber ceilings. And I remember just kind of like rolling around in my bed, and nothing was too intense, but I looked up at the ceiling and I could just see that it was like kind of twinkling, and like the wood grain was kind of moving. And I thought, oh wow, like I think like that was, to me, that was my sign that I was like, oh, like I'm going into labor now. Like I'm leaving the real world behind and I'm going into labor land. Yeah, so I think I stayed up there for not too much longer because the stairs to get up to the bedroom was like almost like a ladder, like a cross between stairs and a ladder. And I thought I better get out of here in case I get stuck up here. So I went downstairs and it was winter, but we had a beautiful outdoor shower. So in the shower, you kind of feel like you're in the rainforest. And so I just went in there with the hot water, which was just lovely. And I stayed in there probably for about half an hour until the hot water ran out. And just a funny moment that I giggle at when I think back to it. Like the hot water ran out and I turned the taps off and I got my towel and I just kind of like cried at the sky, like, there's no hot water. And like I thought my partner could hear me, but nobody heard me. So it was just like this tragic moment all by myself, feeling sorry for myself. Maybe the midwife did hear me because she turned up not too much long, not too far after that. But yeah, things were just picking up, just steadily progressing. And I went inside and yeah, Nick was trying to fill up the birth pool, but I just used all the hot water. So he'd started like boiling big pots and boiling the kettle and just starting to fill up the pool. And so I was kind of just wandering around the house. I had a sling that I was kind of swinging in and just kind of moving. I think I was looking for a place to get comfortable, and that just didn't really exist at that time. And because I'd been in the shower and I'd been in the nice warm water, I just wanted to get straight into the pool. But it wasn't ready. And at some point there, the midwife, she just showed up. She just turned up and I think she said that she could hear me and thought like, I think I need to be there now, which was amazing. Like it just totally took that whole, like, I didn't even have to think about calling her. She just appeared, which is like really what you want in a midwife. Yeah, like a magical fairy godmother. And it was really good to have her there because, yeah, Nick was just really preoccupied with getting that pool filled because in between each contraction, I was just like, how much longer? Like, I really want to get in. And I was really focused on that. And the midwife kind of snapped me out of it and just said, Brett, like, he's doing his best. You just need to, like, I'll tell you when it's ready. And that was just really good because I just let go of that. And that's when I kind of, yeah, like went inward, you know, kind of started sounding a bit more primally. I like crawled up onto the couch and was like trying to feel if I could feel the baby's head and like just without any thought of like what I'm nude and like doing that in front of, you know, the midwife. And she just kind of said to me like, oh, do you feel anything? And like, well, what do you feel? And I said, oh, I'm not really sure. And she asked me if I wanted her to check. And I said, no, it doesn't matter. Yeah. And so I was just continuing to labor, just waiting for this pool. And like every now and again I'd say like, is it nearly ready? And she'd say, no, like you don't want to get into the pool if the water's not high enough and your baby comes like half in, half out. So you need to wait for it to get to a certain level. And and I knew that. So I said, okay. And I think I only had one more contraction and I opened my eyes and very politely just said to her, like, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to ignore you now. And I hopped in the pool and like laid down on my side, just trying to get into the water. But yeah, and I think pretty much as soon as I got into the pool, I felt that I just started feeling a little bit pushy. And I just kind of went with that, like let my body push a little bit. And I turned to the midwife and Nick and said, like, can you see a head? And they were both kind of like, oh, whoa, like, yeah, like we can see the head, it's happening. And I think probably the next contraction, her head came out, and then she just like shot out, like she shot like across the pool, and I had to kind of scoop her up and yeah, like grabbed her by the arm and like pulled her back in. And yeah, so it all kind of really happened quite fast, which is what the doctor had kind of prepared me for. Like I'd told the doctor that was looking after me with the stitch and all of that, because he was saying to me, like, do you want to have the baby at this hospital where I am, or at another hospital 2 hours away from home? And I said, oh, actually, I'm planning to have the baby at home. And he was just like, he just kind of seemed shocked. Like he didn't really know what to say. And he ended up saying, well, I'd advise you to have have your baby in the hospital. And I said, okay, like why? Like, what's the reason that you can give me for that? And his reason was that, I might have scar tissue on my cervix, or my cervix, because it was incompetent. That's another thing that I just hate that word. I prefer early ripening. I want to make that a thing, but I don't think the medical system will pick that up. But anyway, he said like my cervix basically could just blast open or tear open, and I was at higher risk of bleeding. And that just didn't really feel, it just didn't sit with me. And I yeah, I just didn't believe that that was going to happen to me. I didn't believe that that was true. And it wasn't. Like she did come fast, but she didn't come flying out of me. I didn't have any tearing. Everything was fine. Yeah, and so yeah, she was born Trista Bow, and that was just so amazing to have a baby at home. Like the dogs are coming up behind us, like checking out, like what's going on here. And my daughter hadn't actually made it home. We hadn't called them in time. Like we did kind of call them as soon as I got in the pool, but it just wasn't, even though they were only 10 minutes away, it just wasn't fast enough. So my mum and my daughter walked in like a couple of minutes after she was born. Um, and I hopped out of the pool and up onto the sofa bed, and just, she latched. As soon as she was born, I saw she was really badly tongue-tied, but she still latched. And um, I didn't really hardly have any bleeding, and placenta came like really easily. And it was just like, we did it. Like we were home as a family. Within a few hours, I was back up in the loft with the baby. And yeah, it's just a real full circle moment after having like a medical kind of pregnancy.
So beautiful to hear that journey. And I understand that you felt, with your history and the external pressure, and obviously, especially, that first pregnancy after so many losses, it makes sense to also have that fear, even though you felt like you trusted your body and your intuition was telling you other things. It's hard to listen to that at that point. I really understand that. But what an amazing body you have, and what a beautiful story, a redemptive birth at home. And it really goes to show also, doing your inner work and having, trusted people around you, and a partner this time as well that was just so loving. And I mean, I really believe the partner we have and all of that really affects also actually bleeding. And that's something that many midwife would echo, that that's also curious, curious
That is
fact,
very
right?
curious. Yeah.
And so, tell us now, falling pregnant your third time, or at least, your third birth. Tell us the journey to that. And did you have any more losses in between?
Yeah, I did. I had two more losses after I had Trista, and both of those pregnancies, we kind of, after Trista was born, we talked a lot about whether we were going to have another baby, because for us, or for me, you know, it wasn't so simple as deciding like, okay, let's have another baby, try, fall pregnant. It was always going to be likely that deciding to have another baby was also deciding to potentially go through more miscarriages. So we kind of gone back and forth on that, just like deciding and really committing to having another baby. Because I think too, for me, not committing to it or saying like that's what I want makes it easier to handle if it doesn't happen. I think that was a big part of it. But at the same time, we like weren't trying not to get to fall pregnant. And so I fell pregnant twice in that time and had two more miscarriages. But I feel like I knew when I found out that I was pregnant both of those times that it wasn't my baby. If that makes sense, like that this wasn't the baby that I would hold in my arms one day. Uh, and the last miscarriage that I had was probably the most transformational for me, I think, pushed me further than I'd been before on that journey. And that was because I knew I was pregnant, and then I think at about, I can't remember how many weeks exactly, somewhere along the way when I'd had the ultrasound, the baby was there, but it didn't have a heartbeat. And so by that point, I'd decided, like quite a few miscarriages ago, that I wasn't going to have D&Cs. Because I just didn't know what effect that was having on my body and my cervix and all of that. So I, like I had been for the last few miscarriages, I was waiting for that to happen naturally, and it took a long time. It was, I think around 6 weeks that I was waiting, which just felt like forever to me. And I was also still breastfeeding Trista at the time. And what really stuck with me was just what I was going through in the night. In the nighttime, I was awake with a toddler with teeth that's feeding, and I'm all hormonal. Like my body still thinks that it's pregnant. I've still got these hormones just pumping. My breasts were so tender. It was like actually quite torturous, but I was just so determined that like I knew that it would, makes me emotional thinking about it, but I knew that it would hurt my heart so much to go through another miscarriage, not have that baby, and to also lose my breastfeeding relationship with my daughter. So I really kind of pushed myself through that. But I ended up calling a wise woman, like friend of a friend, and she just talked me through um, lots of things, caring for myself, and really put things into perspective for me. She kind of prescribed me some steams and um, a few ritual practices and things. And as I was preparing to begin doing all of those things, then I started bleeding, and um, and physically that miscarriage was actually probably the most difficult for me. It lasted the longest. It was the most painful, and I don't know exactly why that is, but I think it just, my uterus had been through so much by that point, I think truly was what that was. But so that was the last miscarriage that I had. And I had a bit of a break after that. My best friend was getting married, so I didn't want to be pregnant. And so as soon as that wedding was over, bam, I was pregnant. And yeah, I felt like I knew that this was my baby, and this was my baby boy that had been with me for a long time, for many years. And I knew that this time I didn't want to have the CVS test, that I wanted to do a blood test blood test is a screening test, right? Whereas the CVS was diagnostic. But I felt like I would be happy with just a screening test that was 98% accurate, as well as one ultrasound. So I went to one doctor's appointment and I got the referrals to have that blood test and 20-week ultrasound. And the blood test came back, everything was fine. Ultrasound, everything was fine. Even my cervix was still looking good. And they offered me at that point to have another cerclage, because that's just what happens once you've had one, once you've been diagnosed with an incompetent cervix, like that's just the way that it goes. So yeah, like they kind of prompted me to go down that road, but I just said I don't feel like I need it. And so yeah, so I declined the CVS and the stitch this time, and I didn't go on any progesterone. I didn't put myself on bed rest. I just lived my life the way that I wanted to, and it was really healing for me to do that. You know, with my pregnancy with Trista, I couldn't be a mother in the way that I wanted to be with my daughter. I couldn't swim, I couldn't have baths, I couldn't have sex, so many things that I couldn't do. And so I just decided that I was going to do all of it this time, because I really just had this really deep, deep trust. And I just knew that if I didn't tamper with my body, that everything was going to be okay, and that my body knew what to do and I could trust it. So that pregnancy was just really healing, really personally healing. And I just enjoyed it and prepared to free birth this baby. And that was a choice, that was something that I kind of grappled with throughout the whole pregnancy. I knew that I would have my baby at home. I just didn't know whether or not I would be doing it with a midwife or not. But whenever I would imagine my birth, it was just me and my partner. And whenever I would imagine or visualize somebody else being there, it was just a no. And I felt like it was coming from my baby, and I trusted him, and I really trusted myself. I knew that I could give birth, and I'd been at quite a few births, and I'd supported other women free birthing as well. So I had a certain level of confidence, and I also trusted my partner as well. Because he trusted me, and we just had this like really solid foundation, and I knew that he had my back, and we just spent that whole pregnancy talking about everything. And I came to free birth just because it was what felt right for me, not because I was following this kind of hierarchy of birth center, home birth, then you do the free birth, or that I had anything to prove. It just felt like what was right for us. And so I had the pool and everything prepared, and I'd been saying that I didn't want him to be born until after the financial year, just to make my tax time easier. And so my water broke at like 11 p.m. on his due date on the 30th of June. And which was different for me. I didn't mention when I was telling Trista's birth story, but the same thing happened with my water with her. I felt it and I just pinched it, and that was it. And I wouldn't recommend anyone else to do that. I wouldn't say that to any of the women that I support, but that's just what I did, and it just kind of came instinctually for me. But this time my water broke, and that was different. That was new. And so I got up, went to the bathroom and went and told Nick that my water had broken, but I was going to try and go back to bed. But the smell of the amniotic fluid, because I have been to birth, I know that smell so well, right? It's unmistakable. And I really felt like just smelling my own, amniotic fluid kind of really shifted my mindset. Like, I don't know, it just felt like, whoa, this is it. And it was like, it felt like some kind of feedback loop is the only way that I can explain it. But I laid down and tried to rest, and I think I laid there for another hour or so, but couldn't really sleep, was having pretty mild contractions that I wasn't timing anything, but they just felt like they were decently spaced apart. But at some point I just thought, I can't lay here anymore. I'm too excited. I have to go wake up Nick, and things were picking up a little bit by then. And so I got him up, and his priority was like, get the pool filled up like ASAP. And we'd done like trial runs with like 3 hoses and like a camping hot water system. And so he was like onto it. He's like, do you want me to fill up the pool now? I just said, yeah, do it. Like, let's just have that ready, because it felt like I kind of missed out on, or we missed out on being together in Trista's labor, because he was busy and then it kind of happened really quickly. So yeah, so he got all that sorted, and I was just kind of having pretty mild contractions, but they were getting closer together. And Trista woke up and she sleeps with me, so she was wanting me to settle her, and that was when I realized that, oh yeah, it is amping up, because I don't want to lay in the bed, I don't want to lay down with her. And she started bossing me around, like, come on mummy, like lay down, like what are you doing, like everyone's acting weird. And it was at that moment I thought, actually, I'd envisioned this beautiful family birth with everyone there, but I think I want you to go to nanny's. So so I called my mum at about 4:30 in the morning, and I was telling myself I'd wait till 5, but I couldn't. So I called her at 4:30, and she was there within like 15-20 minutes, picked up both of the girls, and they were happy to go. Halen was 13 by this time, and we'd spoken lots during my pregnancy about whether she wanted to be at the birth, and she was kind of just like, I don't know, like, not that she was afraid or anything, she just not that into it. She was, in those teenage years, and I think she actually really enjoyed the experience of like turning up at home, and the baby was there last time. So the girls left with mum, and once they were gone, it just kicked in. Like, it was like I knew everyone's taken care of. The pool's there, everything's set up, it's just the 2 of us. And so just the intensity just picked up like really quite quickly after that. And I was just making these sounds that I think if I was anywhere other than at home, I probably wouldn't have made, like I just felt so comfortable to just be my primal self and do whatever it was that my body was telling me to do. And which was just these like really low guttural kind of moans that and I knew that if I like held them out really long, that I would only do like 2 or 3 and the contraction would be done. And but yeah, it was really quite intense. I actually feel like each of my births have been harder as they've gone on, and I don't know if that's because they're like, as time goes on, there's they're more fresh in my mind, the more recent ones. But I think also having my water already broken, that made it a bit more intense as well. So yeah, I was just laboring and moaning, and Nick was just there with me. And I said to him at one point, I was starting to get a bit tired because I hadn't really slept. And I said to him, can you get in the pool with me so that you can just when after the contractions over, you can just hold me, because I felt like I was, you know, kind of tensing just to hold myself out of the pool to try and relax in between the contractions. And he hopped in. So he hopped in, and that was just so lovely. I look back at our video, and yeah, just so lovely to see myself like raw, like in the middle of a surge. And then I just like seriously just like, oh, just like collapse, and he'd catch me in like all of these different positions, and I'd just, you know, laying there in the water, and he'd just hold me so I could just totally relax. Um, and in none of my births, I never wanted anyone to really touch me or like, you know, do any kind of massage or touch or anything like that. And this birth was the same. I just wanted him to hold me and like, don't move. Just so yeah, so that was basically like I spent pretty much my whole labor in the bath, and I started feeling like I want it felt good to bear down with the contractions. But I wouldn't say it was like a pushing sensation. And I just had this intuitive feeling that I needed to bring him down slowly. And I don't remember that being like a conscious thought, but what my body was doing, that's what my body felt like it was doing, just bringing him down really, really gently. Yeah, so that's just how everything continued. I think I had this little moment of transition where I said, he's not coming, the baby's not coming, like it's not happening. And then I think like a few seconds later I went, oh, actually the baby's coming. Like it was just this real, I look back at the video and it's just a funny moment. Um, but I did this like real like like a dry reach kind of, like I was going to vomit, but I knew that I wasn't going to vomit. It was just like came through me like this like massive surge just came through me, and I knew like, okay, like this is it. It's about to happen. And by this point Nick had gotten out of the bath because I was just kind of moving around a lot more. I just needed my space. But he was right there with me, and he could tell that I was like the head was about to come out because I just started going like trying not to push because that's what my body was telling me, like just let this happen really slowly. Um, and I said like, oh, it's stinging, and like, yep, he's right there, and his head came out followed by his body, and I heard Nick say, oh, like the cord's around his neck, and we'd talked a lot about that, and I think that was like quite intuitive. Just the conversations that we'd had in the lead up, he brought that up quite a few times, and we'd watched a lot of videos like with babies with the cords around their neck and you know how to just lift them over and everything. But I kind of tried to get the cord off and it felt really tight, so I lifted him up out of the water and tried to pull it over his head and couldn't get it over his head. Tried, it was around his neck and around his body. We tried to pull it down over his legs. And so I ended up having to like lift myself fully out of the water because the cord was so tight that we just couldn't get any give to loop it over. So I lifted myself kind of like a table, and like the baby was laying on my belly as we tried to untangle him. But uh, he was pretty much crying that whole time, and it was actually almost 30 seconds that it took us to fully untangle him, and the cord was around his neck and then under like his arms, down around his waist, and then back up around his neck again. Yeah, I'll have to show you the video. It was, yeah,
That's a long bloody cord to be able to
yeah,
do that as well. And he must have done so many somersaults and like, how did he get so entangled?
I know. I feel like it must have happened quite early, maybe in the pregnancy. I don't know, at least some of it. But yeah, so he was really wrapped up in his cord. But I think hearing him cry like took a bit of that panic out. It was kind of like, all
Mhm.
right, he's here, he's crying, so obviously he's okay. We just need to get him untangled so that we can hold him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of the most eventful thing that happened in the whole birth. But he was born. I kind of jumped out of the pool pretty quick. I think that was just my, like, from the last birth, I wanted to be able to see how much I was bleeding and all of that. But I hopped out, and the afterbirth pains were just quite intense. I was, yeah, not having fun with those. And I just wanted to get that placenta out because I knew I'd feel better after that. But it was probably about 45 minutes later. Nick said, "Do you want some tincture?" So I drank some like a herbal tincture, and then within about 5 minutes, I'd birthed the placenta, but it it was a lot harder than I had kind of anticipated. Like I had to put a lot more effort into it. With Trista, it kind of was just sitting there and came out. But this time, I like got into a lunge position, and it's funny, we were saying the other day, when Trista was born, we had this beautiful moment of Nick having his first hold of the baby. But with Ambrose, it was like, here, hold this. Like, I've got to get this placenta out. That was his first hold, like, kind of got missed. But yeah, I just got into a lunge position and like kind of wrapped the cord around a couple of my fingers so I could put some tension on it. And when I felt the next kind of after pain coming, I pushed and it came away. So um, yeah, I found it quite confronting just doing that pushing because I just pushed the baby out. I felt like I was, it was scary to push is what I would say. But yeah, so everything was all done at that point, and I hopped back in bed and called mum and said, "Bring the girls back." And she must have called my dad, and he was actually only around the corner. So within like, I don't know, like 5 minutes, my dad just comes wandering into my bedroom, like past the birth pool, the bloody birth pool, and here we are with the baby and the placenta in the bowl and everything. And he was like, "Where's the midwife? Like, what's going on here?" But then yeah, he also wasn't surprised when I told him that we'd just yeah, had the baby, just the two of us. So the girls arrived, and that was just beautiful. And so that we tied his cord off, and we cut it with a knife that we'd bought for him that we're going to give to him when he's older. I'm not sure how old, but at some point we'll gift that to him. And yeah, that's kind of the end of the story. The long story.
Wow. Amazing. And what's his name?
Oh, and his name is Ambrose.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
he's my beautiful spirit baby. He was with me for a lot of years before he came through. It's just so lovely to have him here now.
Yeah. Wow.
Hmm.
What a journey. And so, if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby, and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
I was thinking about this question earlier today, and the first thing that came to mind was that, you know, we hear a lot to trust your body, trust your baby, trust birth. And that is beautiful, amazing advice, and will serve you well to do that. But that only goes so far if you are around people or in a birthing environment where they don't trust your body and they don't trust you. And so that would be my advice, to work on that inner trust. But to also be aware that you need to have that within your support team as well. Because I think a lot of the time that can be overlooked. I've seen women who have done so much inner work, but then they walk into a hospital where their body and their birth they're just not trusted.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, so true, so true. Your team is everything, absolutely. They will affect your journey as much as your inner
Absolutely.
work. Of course, it goes hand in hand. Both are needed. Yeah, beautiful. And anything for a mama who might, just like yourself, have gone through losses, what would you say to her as she's waiting to conceive again and hopefully this time have her live baby?
I would say talk to your baby, talk to your spirit babies, open up those channels for connection. And even if that's just, journaling, I think for me personally, that really, really helped me through, because in that communication, it helped me to feel like there was maybe some purpose in what I was going through, that there were aspects that, I couldn't and probably would never understand, as to why this was happening, and that it can be really, really freeing to kind of go down that kind of more spiritual path, and handing all of that over to a higher purpose. Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's
Thank you.
what got me through. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing your amazing birthing wisdom.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as The Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.